Welcome back to Contacts. We are joined today by Steve Collins, head coach at Madison Memorial High School, state champion, podcast host of multiple threads, which he will share with you, and owner of teachhoops.com, where they cut out the noise and help you get better as a coach. Steve, really excited to have you on here. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Wow. My mom must have sent that intro to you or something, man.
Well, let's dive into this. And, you know, we met a few years back at PGC grad school, and we stayed in touch and have been bouncing some things off each other over the years. But for the sake of the audience, since they do not know, if you could take us through your background as a coach, how'd you get into it? How'd you land your first job? And heck, while you're on it, how did you start this side hustle you got going that's now slowly becoming the main thing?
We don't have enough time for that. So so how did I get into coaching? Well, I was a high school and collegiate player. I don't remember a time at which basketball was not part of my life. I have an older brother who played Division I basketball. So he'll always tell me that he's a better basketball player than me. But and he got to play against Michael Jordan. That's his claim to fame. That's when ESPN, I think we have it on beta actually. But anyway, he played against Michael. But basketball was my older brother had been a hockey player. I probably would have been a hockey player. It was one of those kind of things. So I was just kind of following what he did. And I think I'm fifth generation teacher, at least fourth, maybe fifth generation teacher, which will probably end with me, I think. So that's a whole nother podcast talking about the education profession. But so I went to Lawrence University and played undergrad and got my teaching degree and knew that I wanted to teach and coach. And ended up moving to northern Wisconsin, Wausau. If anyone's ever heard of the town Wausau, there's Wausau Insurance, but it's in northern Wisconsin, about 2.5 hours north of Madison. And that's where I got my first job. And I literally learned so much in that. First of all, I learned how to be, a young man at that point because it was my first job. But I had some great mentors up there. I was a freshman coach for a year and then a sophomore coach for a couple of years. And then a JV coach. So it was almost like a perfect timing thing as far as developing me as a person and as a coach and learning from different head coaches, because there were a couple in that stretch. And then applied for that job and didn't get it. And remember being disappointed, remember going out with the AD and not understanding why I didn't get it. Now at 55, I understand why I didn't get it. But at 26, I surely didn't. And during that time, met my wife, who was in grad school in Bloomington. So decided we wanted to move to a little bit bigger town. Wausau is a relatively small town in northern Wisconsin, and knew of Madison because that's where I had grown up, and just was basically looking for a job. And actually turned the first job I got down at a middle school because they wanted me to be a science teacher, and I'm a math teacher, which just seemed weird to me. So I turned that down. And then a couple of years later, a job opened up at Madison Memorial. And I don't know if I've ever told this story, but there's like 528 high schools in Wisconsin, something like that. And maybe 100 of them are large schools. But anyway, I remember this is when people printed things back in the old days, and they had all the phone numbers and all the things of every school in the state. It was like a binder about half an inch thick. And I remember taking that binder and circling all the jobs that I thought would be good jobs to get. And there were maybe like 30 or 40 of them. And then there were some that I thought would be underdogs. And this was one of them that I thought maybe I could get, and then I could turn around into a winner that had never been a winner. So I ended up getting a math job, and knew of the head coach, but I had reached out to him, but just took it because of the math job, and that my wife had gotten a job in Madison, and it's like, we're just going to move to Madison. If I coach, I coach. If I don't, I don't. Um, and then the way it worked out is the head coach that was there actually became an assistant principal, and I got the job October of my first year. And I got married in July of that year. So the blessing was my wife only knew me only knew me living in the same town as a head coach. So never knew me as an assistant. And we can talk about that difference between those two later, because there is a huge difference. But she's only known me as a head coach. So it's kind of like the way I kind of keep track of how many years I've been married. So I can keep track of that. And then ended up getting that job in October of that year, and I was the only applicant. So if that tells you anything about kind of what people thought of the program and how successful it had been in the previous 30 years, people were not knocking the door down to get the job. It had always been a little bit of an underachiever. Even, I grew up on the other side of town, so it was always kind of one of those jobs. But I knew the coach that was there had set up a really good youth program. I knew there were some players coming. And I knew that there were going to have to be some cultural changes at that point, but we can talk about that later. But that's and then I've been there for the last, I don't know whether we count the COVID year, but 24, 25 years. Yeah, it's been good. And I'm getting to the end, to be honest with you. My wife knows that. I know that. I think COVID showed that to me. That in my 30s, I think the world would have come to an end if I'd had to stop coaching. But I think that year off kind of showed me that I'll be okay. It will be all right when I hang it up. I got kind of a special group right now, but when my wife always says there'll always be a special group coming, and I go, I know there will be.
There will always be another kid. So when you make your decision,
and she's younger than me, so it's kind of like one of those things. Like, we kind of want to retire together too, so it would be one of those kind of things. But
well, when you finally make it, it'll be time, and until then, you just keep pounding the stone. So let's talk about this. You're the only applicant. You've been a coach at lower levels, and now it's time to sit in the big chair. And part of this podcast has been trying to help position new coaches, old coaches, people reflecting, like, what do I do? What are some of the things that you realized right away you had no idea what you were doing?
Okay. There's lots of things there. I knew first of all that I had to change the mentality. I think they didn't even practice on weekends when I took over. So I'd come from a program that had been very successful in Northern Wisconsin. So I kind of had a blueprint. This is when people were still not typing things in, printing things out. Portfolios and all those kind of things. So I had thought through everything that I wanted to do before I got the job, as far as the youth program, as far as expectations, as far as that. I had to come in and make some really hard decisions. I had to cut some kids that probably would never have been cut before. Eventually I cut one of my assistant coach's kids. So, I had to draw a line in the sand more than maybe my personality even wanted, but I knew I had to change the mentality and make it small steps. And we were just talking about this the other day, because we have such a young team and we've had to reset everything. Like, we didn't have a season. So all that historical stuff, I've never coached any of the kids. It's all gone. So our whole motto this year is, this is what we do, kind of thing, because they don't know. And we've had to kind of reestablish a lot of the things that this is what we do. This is what we do. And one of them was one of my first goals was not to lose at home, to make home one of those places that we just didn't lose. But I remember, I've told this on my podcast, but I remember that first season We were 7-14. It wasn't my best coaching year, but the next year when we were 12-10 was one of my best coaching years ever. But we were 7-14. We lost in the regional finals or something. And I remember sitting in the locker room talking to one of my assistant coaches going, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't be 7-14. And it was my only losing season, but I just remember sitting there going, I can't. And he says, we'll be okay. And we spent that 2-hour bus ride basically mapping out what we needed to do. What could we control? And that was pre-huddle. That was pre-crossover. So basically, we out-prepared people. We out-hustled them, to be honest with you, for about 10, 15 years. We out-scouted them. We knew everything. We had cameras going everywhere. It was that so we tried to control the controllables. We couldn't control who was walking in the door, but we could control out scouting people and that's how those slow steps kind of started happening. And then luckily enough, Wesley Matthews was a 7th grader or 6th grader at that point or something. And then we got some classes coming through our youth program, the class before him, the class after him. That was enough to kind of get that momentum moving and the ball kind of rolling down the hill. But I think part of it was that scouting part was a huge part of. I tell young coaches, because I mentor young coaches through Teach Hoops, is you kind of don't know what you don't know until you it's like what happens when you show up and the bus doesn't show. I mean, it's just stuff you don't know. So what I tell young coaches is I always tell the young ones the first couple of years you should just get a notebook and you should just start writing everything down, because I can walk you through the steps, but there's going to be 17 curveballs. There's going to be a mom that calls you when you're playing in the state semifinals complaining that her son didn't get off the bench. He hadn't gotten off the bench all year. Like there's just things you're not prepared for that happen. And, you'll get used to that. And, it doesn't bother me anymore like it did in my 30s, but it's, over prepare, but you're never going to be prepared. And, try to take care of your health, try to exercise, try to get sleep, because you're going to get run down, those kind of things. But I just don't think you don't know what you don't know, which is, there might be a blessing. It's like being a parent sometimes. It's like when you leave the hospital and they hand you this, like, I can go home. What are you talking about? I can go home with this baby after 2 days. I don't know anything, but it's similar to being a parent. It's like, you'll figure it out, just love them and do your best and you'll figure it out, kind of thing.
I think part of the dichotomy there, though, is most parents that I have encountered are aware that they have no idea what they're doing. Many of us in coaching, especially when we're young, feel like we have all the answers. And the sooner we know that we don't, the ability to pivot and the ability to be flexible suddenly becomes a superpower, because you realize, like, I don't know. The answer is always, it depends. And
I knew more basketball in my 30s than I do now. Because I thought I knew it all. I go, oh my God, I know so little. Like, there's so much to know. So I agree. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Since we didn't have a season last year, you didn't have a season, and we jumped back into practicing for this year. And as you just described, you're trying to re-implement, this is what we do. What things have you held on to intentionally that you're never letting go of? And what things have you reevaluated at this point and just punted on? Because you know what, the energy that it would take to re-implement that and the return on investment just isn't worth it.
That's a great question. There's a lot of things I've kept because they have worked. I mean, I'll tell you a story. Before our first home game, I spent 45 minutes. I literally typed up 3 pages of protocols. Like, here's how pregame works. Here's where you sit. I mean, they didn't know anything because they're so young and they had never. So some of that stuff I was tweaking about that. I think the biggest part is I have to be more flexible on practice. I have to be more flexible on no shows and illness and things that maybe in prior years I haven't been quite as flexible. I mean, I was telling you before we came on the air, it's like we got shut down. I had 7 guys at practice. I mean, I literally practiced for the first time in 15 years. One of my assistants, I literally had to practice so we could at least walk through some things. So I think things that I have done is I've become more flexible with that. But a lot of the standards and things like that, I don't think have changed. During COVID, we obviously did a lot of stuff as coaching staff and felt the most prepared we've ever been, but really not prepared at all, kind of thing. I mean, I was literally teaching them which hand to put up to when the ball is at the top of the key and I'm guarding the guy in the wing. I literally was teaching them because I was telling you, it's 2 sophomores and a freshman. They were getting 7th grade coaching the last time they were playing. Right. So they don't know like things that they should know. So I think that's been our biggest, that half the stuff we worked on during COVID, we had to throw out because we just can't do it. Like we can't do it right now. Next year, maybe, but we just can't do it. I think that's been the biggest thing, but a lot as far as tradition. I mean, they see 3 pictures on the wall when they go in the gym every day. So I don't have to necessarily preach tradition. Right. And, you know, they see the banners, they see all that stuff. So I don't need to necessarily, they know what school they go to. So I don't have to do that. I just have to set, to be honest with you, I have to set the bar lower. Like, I'm not really at all worried about wins and losses this year. Never thought I'd say that. Never thought that would come out of my mouth ever. But I just want them to get better. If we get better, we'll be a tough out in March.
And I would be curious to know, if we had a time machine to jump towards March, that if your investment by default, I guess, this year on being process oriented rather than outcome oriented pays dividends.
It might. I don't think it necessarily will, because we've got injuries, we've got other things going on with the team. We're not real deep. If we stay healthy, I think it could. I agree. I'm just trying to keep I want to win as much as anyone, don't get me wrong, but I just don't want them to because we're so young, to get frustrated when things aren't going. When we lost 3 in a row, you would have thought, just looking at them, it wasn't me. I was like, okay, well, we got better. In those 3 losses, we got better. Right. And by the 3rd one, we probably would have won 2 out of those 3 if I'd have had any depth. The other teams we played had more depth than me and more experience. So I can live with that. I can. They can't. That's the issue, is I'm trying to keep them positive. I'm trying to keep them motivated. They're motivated, but I'm just trying to keep them, because I don't want them to feel like failures, because they're not. This is where we are, and we'll be fine. It's just going to take a little longer than normal, I think.
Right. So let's talk about that for a second then, in a couple different ways. One, if you were to leave and go do something else, coaching wise, what's something that you would definitely bring with you from a program standpoint, because it's such a core piece to who you are, what you believe in, what you teach, what student athletes who've graduated from your program have taken with you? So that's one. And then on the second part of that, what tools or what approaches are you using to try to keep them focused on the positive when it's hard for them because they don't have the same experience you do?
It's hard because I'm making practices much more competitive than they have been in the past. So I'm trying to make it more, this year I have had more equal teams going against each other than I ever had in my 25 years of coaching. Usually I'll have my top 7 together and then my next ones, and we're working and we'll mix. But this year is probably 90-10. It's like I'm 2 equal groups, because they all need to work on the same stuff. And they're really all playing. There's one kid that's really not playing on my roster, and everyone else is playing. Right. Because I got 10 healthy kids at this point. So, so everyone's playing. So it's like, I don't really, I don't know what mixture is going to be there at the end of the game. So I think that's been really good for us. I'm challenging them on a regular basis. you know, it can be whatever we're doing in practice, but it's all competitive and it's all challenges. And it's a lot more of live stuff. I mean, I would like to do more small-sided games. I would like to do more breakdown stuff, but I literally am teaching them how to play. And they are at this point AU summer players, and they're not high school players. And most years it takes a week and they kind of switch gears, and they both have really good things to them. Summer and they both have good things, but they, you know, like I tell them, I said, trust me, watch college basketball. That doesn't look like summer basketball. It looks like high school basketball more. There's structure, there's scouting, there's things. And I said, you're not there yet. And I've used the analogy. I said, you guys are crawling right now and you want to run and you haven't learned how to walk yet. So I'm trying to get you from crawling to walking, and then we can deal with running. But you're trying to go from crawling to running and you're jumping 6 steps. And I can't let you do that as your teacher and your coach. I can't let you do that. So I think that's one of the big things. As far as things that I would take with me, I mean, I would take the whole playbook. But I think what we do well as a program is how I mean, I'm a teacher first. I mean, I teach AP stats. I teach. I just happen to coach. I mean, I'd make more working at the convenience store than coaching. Hell.
Isn't that the truth?
It's community service. I told my wife, I said, I mean, I've always wanted to be part of Big Brothers Big Sisters. I mean, this is my community service.
Absolutely.
So I think how we teach and how that has pivoted over the years is one of, I think, our superpowers. First of all, I have a great staff. I've had 2 staffs in 25 years, and they are literally the only reason I'm still coaching. Because I have great, I mean, I'm not worried about tomorrow. I'll do practice plan when I wake up tomorrow. I know we're all set for our scout, blah, blah, blah. But I think how we teach them. And one of the things I've had to do this year is I've done much more classroom stuff, because I think some of my players, that's the way they learn, just being so young. So we've done a lot more, you know, obviously some of them are auditory. I mean, you know, the 3 different learning styles. Right. We do a good job of, you know, the physical part. But some of them I think have to connect the 2. And that's what I was talking to James, a Teach Hoops member, about. I said, he was asking about my film sessions. I go, well, like tomorrow we play on Tuesday. So tomorrow we'll go through our scout, we'll have a practice, and then I'll take them to the film session and I'll see how much they remember, because we're going to talk about the specific opponent. They'll have their notebooks. I'll say, all right, take out your notebooks. What's 3 big things? Because I keep things in 3s. What are the 3 big things that you learned from practice today? And then we'll have a discussion about it, because some of them that triggers more than the actual, you know, and then we'll watch film on them too. But I'm just trying to grab those different learning styles, because I think it works. I think it really does work. It does from classroom. I can see it in my classroom every day. Yeah,
that's been one of the bigger takeaways for me. After coming back,
PGC thing. It's a PGC thing, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And I'm just noticing it's like, I feel like I'm speaking a different language sometimes, because it's been so long and there's a delay. And so it's like, okay, what can we do differently as the adults to try to reach them? Because ultimately that's the burden of the job. Right. And so I've noticed that this year more than any other year. So I love that.
Well, and the thing is they're connected to that device. So we don't even print out a paper scout anymore. We send it to them. We send them clips. We just send it to them. I mean, we'll still do it together, but they're so connected to that device that like, boom, boom, that's where their world is. That's where their social is. That's where everything is. Like, I can give them a paper scout, but the notebook thing is more, I just want their brain to process like a classroom, you know, hey, we need to, like Tuesday's opponent, we need to keep them out of the paint. They got a Division I freshman. We got to keep them out of the paint. We got to make them shoot 15 to 20 footers. And, you know, we got to get to the free throw line. Those will be our 3 big points for tomorrow. We'll talk about that for an hour and a half of practice. But then when we get there, you'd be surprised. Like, write down the 3 things we talked about.
Wouldn't be surprised at all.
but now now that we've done it enough, they know that I'm going to ask them
Yeah.
things about that. So they're thinking. I just want them thinking, pivoting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Let me ask you this much, especially since part of your business is helping others or mentoring other coaches into growing their craft. So you can spin this question however you want, but what I'm really interested in is, what have you learned watching other teams, sports, coaches that you have directly then applied to your craft? And it can come from your mentorship where you're talking to people. It can come from going down, you coach volleyball as well. What's transitioned from that, right? Like, I'm always curious where people are willing to look outside of the silo of basketball. And so if you could offer a few things that you have directly stolen and applied that would help people see, no, there's a million different ways you can get better.
Yeah. I'll tell you a couple. One is, I think I take a lot from football coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And we have really worked on situations more.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got it down to one sheet of paper where we basically look at that sheet of paper in the last 2 minutes and know what we're supposed to do. So that's one thing I know from COVID that we spent a lot of time on. From the mentoring standpoint, from coaches, I think having coach how I coached when I was, in my 30s and how I'm coaching now is different because the kids are different. I just think you tend to coach or teach the way that you were. And I think the last 10 years, I've been pivoting a lot away from that, from a lot of different aspects. For my business, I think my business has opened my eyes to that. I think, a lot of the clinics I've gone to have opened my eyes to that. Some of my mentors have opened my eyes to that. I just think how I communicate with the kids is just different. I was always communicating with them, but I think how I do that has really changed. And that's something I think I've taken from some of the people I respect in the game of how they do it. And then I've tried to convey that to the young ones want to be, I grew up in the Bobby Knight era. I grew up in that era. That's not, you coach like Bobby Knight anymore, you're not going to have a job for very long. That's just, that era is gone. And it should be, to be honest with you, but it's just a different type of thing. I've also learned through helping them that it's a relatively simple game, and we complicate it more than we need to. It's about putting this little round ball into this little, it's not that difficult. And that's where I think COVID helped me, because I've tried to simplify as much as I can, the things that we do. Not that, I'm still going to change my defenses on you, make your head spin probably, but I'm going to simplify it down where, it's not as many things for the boys to remember. So I think that's a big thing for me, at least.
All right, let's be one more specific on your tenure as a volleyball coach.
My tenure's over as a volleyball coach.
I am aware. Other than occupying yourself and being around the kids, what did you learn coaching volleyball that has enhanced your ability to coach with basketball?
That's a great question. What did I take away from my volleyball coaching things? I think the length of practice, I was able to get things done faster and more precise. I think the respect of time, that's the first thing. Second thing is to respect a primary sport versus a secondary sport in some respects. Nobody cares about boys volleyball as much as they care about the packed gym for the basketball games. So I think that was another big part of it. I think those would be the two big ones. You would think I would turn my own phone off on a podcast, but anyway, sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Let's use that as a little segue there. You mentioned on the previous response that your coaching has changed, and in particular, your approach. How would you articulate in 2 or 3 bullet points for people that need a little bit more filter, how you have changed? Like, you were once here and now you're here, and here's why.
I don't think anger and frustration is a way to coach. And I think early in my career, a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. Don't get me wrong. We had like 26 turnovers in our first game this year. There was a lot of frustration, but they're also so young. They didn't know any better. They were trying to make we call them 100% passes. They were trying to make 40% passes. They were trying to make the, ESPN thing. So I think and part of that's being a parent. Part of that's probably having coached my kid a couple of years ago. Is I think for me, they don't respond to it. They literally don't respond to it. It's, threats, anger, and frustration maybe work in the short term. They don't work in the long term. Someone holds a gun to your head. Yes, that's a threat, and it's going to make you do something, but it's not going to motivate them. It's not going to be a long-term solution. And I think age mellows you a little bit. I don't think the highs are as high as they were, and the lows aren't as low as they used to be. When we lost our first state finals, we were undefeated the entire season, lost in state finals. I mean, I'm married to a psychologist. I don't think I was clinically depressed for a year, but I was probably pretty close, because I didn't know if we'd ever go back. We ended up winning 3 after that, but I think the lows were really low and the highs were really high. And now I think, it is what it is. It's like, we're going to do the best we can. And sometimes we're going to win. Now, the one issue is the adrenaline is still high when we win. Or lose, to be honest with you. So that I forgot about the adrenaline rush and the not being able to sleep after a game thing during COVID. I forgot about that, because adrenaline's a crazy drug. But that I won't miss when I do hang it up. I mean, I'll miss the competitive part, but I won't miss the 2 a.m. not being able to sleep and then having to get up the next day to go to work kind of thing.
So let me ask you this, because this is something that a little more senior in the profession like you, I am able to stay pretty even keel regardless of outcome. So it's like, how do you teach that, or how do you offer suggestions for people that are still stuck on the roller coaster of emotions?
Well, I think part of it is I think people are scared for their jobs too. I think that's part of the discussion I've had when I've mentored people too, is I think they're worried about losing their jobs. So it's harder to keep that more level. I mean, if I don't coach another game, I'm okay. If they fired me tomorrow, I'll go fishing, whatever. I don't care. So comes a freedom with that too. It's like, I'm just going to do what's right, and let's go. So I think the outside, I think having, what I refer to as a mistake response kind of thing. You got to have a response when things don't go well, and I tend to walk the dogs when things don't go well, even in January, and I'll work that stuff out on that walk because it's so cold out. I think you got to think through that before it happens, and that can level that roller coaster high and low. It's hard when you win a big game. Trust me, but I just think I come down faster. I come down to next opponent, let's go kind of thing. When you've done it for like 500-600 games, it's like a little bit easier, I think. Yeah, no, I think to your point, people are worried about what's going to happen if, and quite frankly, at our age and our experience, like, I don't care. Like, whatever. If you want somebody else to do, I just don't. Like, bye. Keep it moving. All right, let's do this. What have you most recently changed your mind on? And it does not have to be basketball related. This question is more about how you are analyzing what you do and why you do it in whatever space it happens to be in. So I'm curious,
what is something that you used to be over here and now you're over here, and here's why, where you've done a complete 180 of where you used to come down on something?
Well, basketball wise, I kind of like halves when I have a bench. We
Okay.
play halves in Wisconsin. So I was not a fan of halves when we went to it. I think it's a better flow of the game.
Uh-huh. So like college.
It's like college. Yeah. We
Okay,
play two 18-minute halves.
Fascinating.
So if you don't have a bench, man, that's been part of our problem is we're not real deep. So it's a better flow of the game.
Yeah.
I missed the coaching part between quarters, but I've really kind of shifted on that.
Uh-huh.
I'm neutral on the shot clock.
Do you have one?
No.
Oh, okay.
You?
Absolutely. I wouldn't play without one.
Yeah, I'm not sure it does. I'm not sure it helps the game. That's why I just don't think it. We could have an 8-hour discussion.
Yeah, we could talk about that off of this.
I think it becomes more college-like and everyone plays similar. When there's not a shot clock, there's more variety. That's my only discussion. That's my only discussion with no shot clock. I don't really care.
Fair enough.
I don't know if you've listened to my podcast. The one thing I think is we should get rid of the jump ball. I think the jump ball is a stupid thing. Like the visiting team should get the ball, alternating possession. Let's go.
There you go.
They're horrible at throwing it.
What about professionally as you grow your business? What's something that you changed your mind on recently? This goes to basketball and goes to life too. I got to give up control. And it was hard early in my business. Now I have people helping me in my business. And it's the same thing with my assistant coaches. Like I haven't done a scout in like 7 years. Now I'll go through the scout, I'll watch film, I'll do that, but I have other people doing things like that for me. And that's probably one of the reasons I'm still coaching is I've been able to let go of control. Like one of my assistants basically runs our offense. So it leaves me time to do other things. It's people I trust. So I think from both a business and a coaching standpoint, it's like, I mean, there's only so many hours in a day. Bill Gates still has 24 hours in a day, just like you and I do. So as my business grows, I'm definitely going to have to keep hiring people to help just because I can't do it all anymore. So let's finish with this. How do you advise people who are just starting or early enough in their career that they haven't reached the point that you just described where I delegate? How do you coach them on that early when they're not real comfortable doing that?
I don't think you should real early. I think you should do everything real early. However, hiring your staff is the second most important day of the year, other than the most important day is the day you pick your team. Because if one bad apple can spoil the bushel, trust me.
Right.
So the day you pick your team is the most important, but the day you have your staff is the second. You have to find people you can trust, people that can do things, people that, you have to think about it. If I'm in an organization and I don't get to do anything, I'm just why am I in the organization? So that's why I think even as a young coach, you should have your hands in everything. You should be doing the buses. You should be communicating with the parents. You should be doing the scouting. You should be doing the game, all that stuff. You should do it all. However, you should be starting to delegate that too, once you kind of know all those things. So I think that even though you should be doing it and you should know it all, you have to delegate. I mean, if you're going to have a family and a life and you're going to do anything like that, you better learn to delegate, man, or you're going to be a single coach, something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Tell us where people can get more information from Coach Collins to upgrade their program.
All right. So there's lots of places. You can go to www.teachhoops.com for coaches who want to get better. So that's my membership site. You will get my personal email address if you go there. Then you can go to any of my 4 podcasts, Coach Unplugged, the 5-minute basketball coaching podcast, which needs a name change, but I'm leaving it, High School Hoops, and Funnel Down Defense. So those 4. If you're looking for a free community, my Facebook group is the largest Facebook group for basketball coaches in the world, called just type in basketball coaches. It'll have 2 balls in it. It's got 55, 60,000 people in it. So go over and check that out. I have a newsletter. So if you join the Facebook group, you can get in the newsletter. So I send out stuff just about every day on my newsletter. YouTube, you can go over to Teach Hoops on YouTube. What am I missing? Oh, my Twitter account is at Coach Collins JMM. I'm a little bit everywhere, as I telling Coach before I came on. So love to connect. If you have any questions or anything like that, I'm here to help. I don't sleep. I'm part vampire, so more than willing to help.
True. Funny. Well, I can tell you, having been on the site, there's some really good resources there. He's got a whole season plan. He maps everything out for you. You can basically plug and play a lot of things till you figure out what you're about on your own. So if you haven't visited, please do so and check out all he has to offer.
Thank you.